Well, hello, beautiful ones. I am Stacey Murphy, the head vixen of the Vixen Academy, and I want to welcome you to my podcast where the topic today I'm going to be sharing with you, if you want to be loved, you have to stop chasing approval. All right. And what I will share, so make sure you have paper and pen, because what I'm going to share today is the emotional elegance formula to get freedom from guilt and shame, because guilt and shame is what is behind chasing approval. So, how this topic even came up in the first place is, I've been using, not just me, there've been a lot of people have been using the stop start of the pandemic to really look inward, right? To look at all, and for me, looking at all of my relationships, but more specifically, what relationships may be sabotaging my desire to attract my beloved, right? And I said to myself, if I really want this, I have to have the courage to look, meaning have to have the courage to be proactive, right? Go on a seek and destroy kind of mission versus waiting for something to smack you in the face, right? And so I've been really diligent and proactive in looking for these things so I can actually eradicate them, like pulling the weeds out of your garden so that your garden can flourish and grow. And what I discovered and what I saw was the pain of my relationship with my biological father. I've done a lot of healing work around my biological father, but I noticed there's still little, I call little nigglies that are still there. And I've had this sadness, wondering why my father couldn't love me, why he abandoned me as well as four of his six kids, right? He has six children, but four of us he totally abandoned. And and also wondering, why do I have to do, or what do I have to do in order for this man to show that he cares? And, deep down, I realized I was still looking for my father's approval. And, to even admit that is like, dang, that didn't feel so good to admit that, but it was like, that's what I saw. So I had to, confront, that feeling. And, because there were thoughts of, if he finally accepts me and his role as father, so now I'm worthy to be loved, deep down behind that. And so, what I realized was this, and I want you to think about, if anything I'm sharing also is speaking to you with what you're going through in your life in various relationships. I know with my clients and people, students that talk with me, parent issues always come to the surface. And sometimes, people assume if you're a woman, you have daddy issues, right? If you're a man, you may have mama issues and all this other stuff. And that's not necessarily true. I know a lot of women that have issues with their mother, and a lot of men that the issue they have is actually with their dad. So I just want you to look at, a lot of times it does start with our family and our parents. So I want you to kind of think about it also in that context. And because what I realize is this, when you worry about people accepting you, that's when you're really chasing approval. You're the person chasing the dangling carrot that you can never reach. This is because you're wanting the other person to be different than they are, so you can feel good about who you are. So I'm going to repeat that, right? This is because you're wanting the other person to be different than they are. Meaning, why can't my father step into his role as being a father? Why can't my father show love? Why can't, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And so you're wanting that person to be different so you can feel good about who you are. So you're giving them your power and allowing them to define you. You're allowing them to define who you are. And literally, that is the foundation of the imposter syndrome. Okay. And so, with this, this also says, like, if you have that going around, this also says, I'm not good enough. Or I don't know if I belong. Does any of this sound familiar to you? Have you ever said this about yourself? I don't know if I belong. So I need you to give me approval, right? Then I'll know my worth, right? And then I can accept myself because you told me I can. And deep down inside, even though you may not be saying that to yourself, If you are chasing after, especially someone's approval, subconsciously, that is actually what you are telling yourself, right? So, what happens here, self acceptance, because this is all about self acceptance, because self acceptance is powerful. The opposite is chasing approval, which is being the imposter. All right. So some of you I've heard, maybe people go like, oh, I feel I suffer from the imposter syndrome. Well, the exact opposite of the imposter syndrome is self-acceptance, because that is when you're in your true power. So if you're unhappy because you fear others will reject you, you're already living your worst case scenario. That's your living hell, right? So just ask yourself this: what do I have to lose by being authentically me? You know, you don't have anything to lose. Maybe you'll find happiness, right? Since you're currently living in pain. So you really don't have anything to lose by being authentically yourself. And, here's what gets in the way, though, of self acceptance. That is the guilt and shame. That is what gets in the way of self acceptance. This is why, guilt and shame are some of the most powerful manipulation tactics that are used. And let there be no mistake: if anyone guilts or shames you, they're manipulating you. Okay. Be it a person, or be it an institution, or be it a nationality, or be it a country, right? So if they use guilt and shame, they are manipulating you. So for most, it started, like I said, with our parents. Then it follows us in our romantic relationships. And this is something that I hear all too often. I want my man to accept me, yet I don't like this about him and I want him to change, right? You know what that is called? That's called being controlling. That's called being narcissistic and a little bit hypocritical, right? And stuff like that. Because here's what we truly should desire for in our romantic relationships, especially. This is about being in a divine union. That's what it's truly about. And so when there's self acceptance on both sides, that's when unconditional love has a place to thrive. That's where unconditional love has a place to grow. That's when unconditional love feels authentic and feels nurturing. Right. And so, I guess that's why, my Love Goddess program is so popular and successful, because it is about passionate self acceptance. And it's done a woman's way, right? It's done a woman's way, embracing every facet of your feminine brilliance, right? And so, I developed the Love Guys program because that's how I got my transformation for myself to be the person that you're listening to right now, right? In all my years of transformation. And so that's why I'm really passionate, about Love Goddess. And, as I step deeper into my further healing and awakening and joy, I was just thinking that, yeah, we are definitely in the age of Aquarius, right? It's already upon the world, and we're shifting. The world is shifting back to the feminine so balance can return, right? And so the question is, are you up for the challenge, right? Because some of the biggest rewards, right, when you exchange guilt and shame for self acceptance, right? Some of the biggest rewards that you can experience is inner peace, right? Improved self esteem and confidence. And who wouldn't want more inner peace? Who wouldn't want better self esteem and confidence, right? Also, some of the biggest rewards: better relationship. And first, it'll be a better relationship with yourself. And then when you have a better relationship with yourself, you can have a better relationship with other people, especially those that are closest to you. You won't tolerate bullshit relationships anymore. That's what happened in 2020. A lot of people kicked those bullshit relationships to the curb, right? And stuff like that. That is also about getting rid of the guilt and shame and self acceptance. And if you're a parent, you'll teach and raise your children to have genuine self worth versus allowing them to find and discover their self worth on social media, which is what a lot of parents have done because their own self worth and self confidence is not there. So their kids are turning to social media to define who they are. How is that working for you in your household, right? And then the last biggest reward when you exchange guilt and shame for self acceptance is you'll be able to thrive and live a fulfilling life easier, right? It'll be much easier because you're being your authentic self and you're not dealing with this imposter syndrome and things of that nature, right? And I did another podcast about how you can actually get deeper freedom from the imposter syndrome. So, what I want to share here is, here's now, so take out your paper and pen. Here's now how you can start to accept yourself, right? And I'm going to take you through the Buddhist formula for emotional elegance so that you can drop guilt and shame. All right. So, the first thing I want to do here is actually define from the emotional elegance perspective, from the Buddhist perspective of what guilt and shame actually is, the definition of that. Because I don't want there to be any assuming, because you know what they say about assuming, right? So here's where, in terms of what's behind guilt. Guilt is the idea that you've done something wrong. And as a consequence, your self-worth has been devalued, right? And for example, that's how I felt about Carlton, who's my biological father, right? And with guilt, you don't actually have to do anything. You just have to believe you did. You just have to believe you had done something. This is why guilt and shame are so powerful, because you don't even actually have to do anything. You just have to believe that you did. Someone just has to convince you that you did, right? So you're going to actually do two scores here. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to score your feelings around guilt in your life. And this is your lifetime score overall. So, and I want you to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being you have absolutely no guilt and have never really experienced any guilt in your life. And 10 is you've experienced maximum guilt on so many different levels in your life, and it's totally ruining your life and paralyzing you. All right. So don't overthink it. Whatever is the first number that pops in your head, just write it down on a piece of paper. If you don't have paper, just have it, stationary in your head. All right. So write that down. All right. So now here is shame. Shame is all about you are keeping score of all the wrongdoing and you feel worthless. Okay. So let me repeat that with shame. Shame is about you are actually keeping score of all the wrongdoing and you feel worthless because of that. Okay. Guilt is you just have to think you did something wrong or whatever. You just have to think it. Shame is you're keeping score of all the wrong you feel you've done. Right. So now, no pun intended, you're going to take a score around your feelings around shame. So it's the same thing on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 would be you've never experienced any kind of shame in your life, your entire life. 10 is you are a walking shameful person, or at least you feel that way. So I want you to, yet again, the first number that pops in your head, write it down or keep it in your head. All right. So now that you have those two numbers, what I like for you, this is why I wanted you to do those scores first. Because when you have a high guilt or shame score, meaning 7 or above, especially, you will be experiencing high self-sabotage in your life. All right. When you have high guilt and shame scores, you will experience high self-sabotage in your life. So now that we understand what guilt is, what shame is, from the emotional elegance perspective, now here is the formula, okay? So the guilt formula is this: G equals W1 plus W2, all right? And this is what it stands for. So G stands for guilt, equals W1 stands for concept of wrongness. And let me repeat that. W1 stands for concept of wrongness, okay? Plus W2. And W2 stands for feeling that you're worth hyphen less. It's not one word, it's 2 words. Worth hyphen less. So when it's hyphenated like that, when worth less is hyphenated, it is equivalent to saying you're devalued. Okay, that's what that is. So that's what the guilt formula is. And so now here's how the steps you're going to take so you can start getting freedom from the guilt and the shame. So on your paper, I want you to do it vertical down your sheet of paper. You're going to write A, B, C, D1, D2. Okay. And here's what that stands for. So A stands for activating event. And in parentheses, I want you to put trigger. Okay. Activating event, in parentheses, put trigger. And so here, the trigger for me, and I'm going to give you specific examples in my personal situation with my biological father. So the trigger was experiencing his narcissism. Okay. That was what I said what the trigger was. Okay. Now, B stands for irrational behavior. Irrational behavior. All right. And the irrational behavior is now for you, for most people, the irrational behavior is beating yourself up, blaming yourself, self blame. Okay. And then you act from that place of beating yourself up and self blame. Okay. So that is what the irrational, that's what B stands for, the irrational behavior. Because here's one thing I want to share there. Confident people, those who are self aware, they actually realize the behavior that they're partaking in, and then they take corrective action without beating themselves up. All right. So, this is why the irrational behavior is you're beating yourself up over and over again around this particular situation. Right. And so, in my stance, in terms of the irrational behavior, is, I was feeling, not wanting my biological father in my life because he's toxic. So I was literally, torn between that and should I visit him? Should I not visit him? Just really waffle. Should I talk to him? Should I not talk to him? I don't want to talk to him, all this other shenanigans. And so it was really creating some inconsistent behavior on my part. So C stands for emotional consequence. And in parentheses, put guilt. Okay. So C stands for emotional consequence. In parentheses, put guilt. So in my case, I was feeling so much conflict, like I said. And I was asking myself, what kind of daughter does that make me? How would I feel if my daughter felt this way about me, right? How do I even refer to this man, right? This is all the stuff, the conundrum, the emotional conundrum this whole thing was causing, in me. And, because I was even saying to myself, it's so hard thinking of him as a father and dad because he was never that for me. So I had major emotional conflict around there. And so I was like, you know what? This shenanigans needs to stop. And so D1 stands for dispute it. Okay. So this is what you ask yourself when you want to start to dispute the craziness that's going on. You ask yourself, are you really worth less? And that's hyphenated because, and then you say, are you really worth less? Because I don't want to be around my father, my biological father. Am I really worth less because of that? And, and so this is what you ask your question. So look at what you're being able. And so here's the other way in terms of to also help you dispute it. Look at what you've been able to achieve even under hard circumstances, right? So really look at that. Look at what you were able to achieve, even regardless of the circumstances that were going on. And then also ask yourself this when you're disputing it. What did I do that was wrong? Right? Just really think about it. It's like, did I really do anything wrong? Right? And because remember, there's a reality versus the perception. So here we're not looking at the perception. What we're doing is we're looking at the reality. Did you really do anything wrong? Right? And so when I started asking to dispute this, and I started asking these questions, this is how it sounded in my case. So I said, being raised by a single mom, right? I've been able to achieve so much in my life. And I was able to raise a child that I'm proud of. And her father is always there for her. Right. And so I had to remember that. I was like, I was raised by a single mom. And from that experience, I was able to raise my daughter the way I was able to. And then the other thing that came up for me is, there's no reason to feel bad or wrong for choosing to let go of a toxic relationship. Right. I say that all the time to my clients and students, especially if it's a romantic relationship, drop that donkey like a bad habit, and things of that nature. And so here it's like, I'm going to use that same principle with my biological father. and things like that. It's only conditioning, societal conditioning, that we feel this extra pull to a parent one way or another. But if they are toxic, you need to treat them like anybody else and kick them out of your life or minimize your contact to them because they are messing up your flow, right? And then the other thing, and this is the other question you have to ask yourself. I said, if my biological father did apologize, if he did say, I love you, would that miraculously make me feel any better? you know? And my honest answer to that is no. So if my honest answer to that is no, and the reason why I said no is because I wouldn't believe him anyway. Um, and so I said, then if my honest answer is no, then why am I looking for him to actually do that? Ah, there is the aha. Because my honest answer was no. So I had to ask myself, so then why am I looking for him to do that when I wouldn't even believe him in the first place? Okay. And so then that led to D2. And D2 stands for drop it. And in parentheses, I want you to put let it go. Let it go, let it go. Drop it like a bad habit, right? And so here's what can help in doing that, right? And so in my case, in looking at the circumstances, I actually realized the healthiest decision was to step away from him. Because when we keep ourselves in toxic relationships, we're actually accumulating and attracting other negative situations and people to us. That is the law of attraction. Whether you believe it or not, it's still operating and working in your life. Right. And so what happened is, and also in Buddhist terms, which is something I learned more deeply about, they say that when you keep yourself around toxic people and toxic relationships, what you're doing is you're accumulating negative karma that you'll have to work out in the future. So you're just accumulating this bad juju that you have to work out later on. So here's where you have to literally cut that umbilical cord so you can get your freedom, right? And so when you remember all the things that you were still able to achieve, regardless of the hard circumstances, you show yourself, I am a powerful person. And there's nothing for me to feel guilty or shameful for. And yes, I can finally accept who I am, and I don't have to allow this other person to define who I am. So I invite you to reflect, on what you're feeling guilty and shameful about, and use the Buddhist emotional elegance formula to set yourself free so you can stop chasing approval and start loving yourself in who you are. So you can start accepting yourself. And in so doing, other people will accept you, right? And you will be able to easier accept other people. And from that beautiful place, that is where unconditional love can thrive. And that is what each and every one of us deserves to experience in our life. So don't let somebody else steal your thunder, take your joy, so they can feel good about themselves at your expense. All right. So I invite you to do this. And I also invite you, if you want to speak with me to help you navigate through your own guilt, shame, and things of that nature, any issues you have, so that you can experience self-acceptance and love, so that you can thrive in all of your relationships. By all means, give me a call, send me an email, reach out to me, and I would love to have a conversation with you so that you can thrive within your life and so that you can live a magical life that you can love. And with that, everyone, we are complete, and namaste.